Hello everyone, and welcome to English 520, the Professional Document. I'm Dr. Holly Wells. If you are new to the program, welcome. We're really glad to have you and excited to get to know you. Now this class is some theory, but a lot of practice. So if you've been in the program for a while, you know that some of the courses I've taught have been a little bit theory heavy. This one is going to be, a little bit of theory that we'll go over, and those will be the presentations that I narrate probably more often than I narrate the practical ones. But I'd like us to put those theories into practice, and that's the big deal about this course, and that's why I chose the book that I did. It's got a lot of great examples of things that you can put into practice in your job. The book is called Document Design, A Guide for Technical Communicators. And really, even if you're a creative writer, still in some ways you can consider yourself a technical communicator, because if you have any type of design that you have to do at your job, and I'm talking anything from designing a letter through designing, some kind of marketing communications, you'll find this course really useful. And the fact that it's 11 chapters I thought was perfect, because that gives us a few weeks at the end of the semester to kind of work on our own projects and do something really interesting. The authors of the book are Miles Kimball and Ann Hawkins, and I went over this book and another one before I chose this one, and this one just kind of fit perfectly with everything that I had as goals for this course. So I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope that you'll find the exercises that we do this semester really useful. Chapter 1 of the book is called What is Document Design? And we're just going to jump right in. The authors describe documents as, quote, a practical mechanism for mediating human action within and among communities, nations, and cultures, unquote. If we think about it for a moment, it's not difficult to see how documents really are the foundation of organized society. For instance, Secretary of State John Kerry just finished a 4-year negotiation process with the UN and Iran to end Iran's nuclear ambitions. Without documentation, 4 years of negotiations are meaningless. Documents need to be cognizant of audience, above all. The best written, best designed document will be meaningless if the audience cannot follow it, doesn't understand the language used, is offended by some element of the design, and so on. So, document design is something we should conceptualize as more than just making things look clean and pretty. Every element should be chosen to speak to the document's primary and secondary audiences in such a way that the document's purpose cannot possibly be misunderstood. Okay, information design may be kind of a more modern and new term, but if you think about it, we've always designed information. The cave people drew pictures on cave walls to communicate information about their lives. Ancient Jews read the Torah in the temple from beautifully designed scrolls. Columbus left Spain with some sort of map, albeit obviously an incomplete one. So we've always designed our information into usable chunks. Now, when we talk about information design, we have 3 ways of approaching the concept. As a practice, or what Aristotle might have called a techne, dependent upon the context of the rhetorical situation. As a professional field, an art form with its own set of context-independent rules. Or as an academic discipline, where we develop and test theories about it and compose a body of documented knowledge about it. Actually, it's all 3, sometimes all at once, but it depends on who you are and what your job is. My job as an academic is to understand information design as a discipline. Your job as a professional writer can encompass both art and practice. You no doubt have an understanding of ID overall and ID as specific to your employer, but you also have to apply that understanding in individual circumstances when developing a document from scratch. The authors cite Saul Carliner, who states that ID works on 3 levels. First, the physical, which to us is just the way the human body interacts with the document. Examples would be, for instance, the Windows 8 interface, a spiral-bound user guide, or a trifold brochure. The cognitive, which requires attention to the way the human brain processes information and uses it to solve problems. Examples would be a process chart, a table, or a textbook with external tabs for each chapter. And the affective, which is attention to the need for documents to motivate the audience emotionally, understanding their attitudes, and promote action. Examples would be a banner ad for a 24-hour sale, a text message promoting a special additional discount at Kohl's or JCPenney, or a Facebook post including a photo of a dog that will be destroyed unless someone adopts it. Okay, so now that we have a foundational understanding of information design, let's talk about your role as the information designer when you set about your job of designing a new document. Most of the time, the task of creating a document comes from someone above you, such as a supervisor, manager, or director. Occasionally, you may initiate the process of document development, possibly by recommending something new be created and having that recommendation approved. At any rate, your first job as the document designer is to identify what problem that document will help solve. For example, let's say your boss is hiring someone to fill a vacancy in a department that has been downsized recently. The previous employee left several weeks ago, and the person who was in charge of that employee has been laid off or transferred elsewhere, so that employee would now report to someone much higher on the food chain. As a result, there's really no one to train the new employee. Your boss has asked you to help solve this problem by creating a training manual for the vacant position. The next step in the process is to analyze the problem and figure out the best way to solve it. This process can be simple or complex. In some cases, training materials already exist in less formal mediums or in different departments with similar jobs. In these cases, you may be able to obtain copies of existing materials and adapt them to suit the audience for your document. If no such materials exist, then you'll be creating them from scratch, which will likely involve plenty of research and interviewing. You also need to carefully analyze your audience, not just the actual employee being hired, but future employees in the same position. If the person to be hired for this job is likely to have an advanced degree of some sort, your approach may be slightly different from what it would be if you were writing for an audience with limited education or even limited language skills. And I'm thinking of the types of jobs that immigrants often get hired for because of limited English skills. After analyzing the problem in the audience, you need to figure out what type of document will best serve their needs and solve their problem. For example, the new employee may be at a desk with a computer. Perhaps an online training guide would be easiest for her to use. On the other hand, if the worker is standing at a long table and testing defective electronics, perhaps she would be more comfortable with a spiral-bound book with easy grip tabs that have bold section headers typed on them. Okay, now that you have analyzed your audience, figured out what you have to tell that audience, and decided upon how to tell it, you can begin the process of developing the document. This too can be a lengthy process, beginning with sketches and diagrams, progressing to drafts and usability testing, and culminating in a deliverable. Sometimes your deliverable will be needed right away or just in time. This means you may need to limit the process of design development to available templates within your company, which will save you time. It also means you may have to skip some or all of the testing and just let the document go until it's time to revise. Often things happen so fast in the corporate world that professional writers don't have a lot of extra time to go back and revisit their documentation. However, sometimes it is absolutely necessary, as in the case of technical manuals, policy briefs, financial reports, and other important documents. In an ideal world, we writers get the opportunity to revisit and perfect our work for best usability and effectiveness. What constitutes a document? The examples on this slide should come as no surprise to you now. Documents used to be thought of as physical entities, something we could just pick up and read, hold, file away, burn. Now, though, documents can exist in the ether as just a collection of invisible pixels on a screen or code saved in a file. Hard copies can be things like old handwritten records of transactions, a trifold brochure, a letter about a court case, or a box full of file folders, just stuff you can't bear to throw away in case you need that one thing from 1987. Electronic documents can be things like the Excel spreadsheet open on your MacBook, an online retailer's main web page, your online bank statement, or a writer's blog post. Obviously, these items can be printed out if one is set on having hard copies of documents. However, it seems less and less necessary as the younger generation takes over the work world. We're perfectly fine with documents existing in cyberspace. When you were an undergrad, you spoke as an undergrad, you thought as an undergrad, you reasoned as an undergrad. Now that you've become a professional writer, you put your undergrad ways behind you. Forgive me, that's my version of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Document design didn't require much of you back then. Your English teacher probably had you format your document to fit MLA standards, so you had to meet those standards or get points knocked off your grade. Other disciplines had their own rules for essays too. Here's an example of your MLA style essay, probably something you're very familiar with. Now, you have all sorts of different documents you're responsible for, from web pages to flyers to manuals to posters to correspondence to the list goes on. And for many of those, you'll be obeying your company's version of the MLA style rules, which is a corporate style guide. For others, though, you may have a lot more leeway or a lot more rope with which to hang yourself. So let's make sure you don't hang yourself right off the bat. You guys know I like some rhetoric, so let's talk about Aristotle's appeals, or methods of persuasion. These are as old school as rhetoric gets, really, and they've been remediated, mulled over, challenged, tossed out, or even ignored by various theorists since his time. But for me, they're still pretty much ringing true. The three main appeals are ethos, pathos, and logos. I include kairos because I think it's a crucially important part of the rhetorical process. It's not, strictly speaking, one of the appeals, though. Okay, so first is ethos. Ethos, if you remember your basic rhetoric from comp class, is the appeal based on the speaker or writer's character and standing. The argument is that if an audience is more likely to take the word of an expert in the field than Donald Trump, if the topic is Obama's birth certificate or global climate change, although confirmation bias is also a thing. So, as far as ethos goes, Trump has great ethos when it comes to firing people, but not so much when it comes to determining whether a guy whose birth certificate says Hawaii was actually born in Kenya and somehow faked his American documents. Next is pathos. Pathos is the appeal to the audience's emotions and attitudes. It's the appeal that gets right to the gut, and it's very often visual or visual combined with text. Visuals are like a direct line to the emotions, and that's why you see so many images in advertising. The photo of the dog on the shelter's website usually makes it look as sad and pathetic as possible, but also attractive and not mangy, so you'll feel bad for it and come in to see if you can adopt it before they put it down. The pathos doesn't make the situation any more or less grave for the dog. It just counts on the fact that your heart is more likely to act than your reason. Your reason might be saying, we already have 4 dogs. We do not need another one, particularly not one that big. But your heart says, aw, but just look at him. Think of the pathos they got you with on your way there to pick up your new dog. Third is logos. Logos, from which our English word logic comes, is the appeal to reason. You probably won't see many appeals using logos on the animal shelter's website, but you will see logos incorporated into documents dealing with court cases, processes, instructions, and anything that requires the mind to follow along and accept ideas one by one and build upon them. Logos depends upon the logical syllogism. For example, all men are mortal, Bruce Banner is a man, therefore Bruce Banner is mortal. Wait a minute, that might not be the best one. So, you have to be careful when using logos that you don't fall into the trap of logical fallacies. These are many and dangerous, and you should Google logical fallacies to learn more, if you didn't learn them in your rhetoric courses as an undergrad. Finally, let's talk about kairos. Kairos is a Greek word having to do with time, but not strictly linear time, which is chronos. It's more like a ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Thanks, Doctor Who. No, seriously, kairos has to do with appropriate timing in combination with appropriateness of proportion and appropriateness of reaction. In any given rhetorical situation, for example, you need to develop a training manual for a vacant job. There's simple timing, for example, I need to have this done before she starts next week, but also proportion, as in, you need to make sure you solve the problem with the appropriate thing in the appropriate measure. That could be a spiral-bound manual for a line worker who needs to be able to lay it out flat on a table, or online help for an engineering tech who consults her laptop occasionally as she goes about her day. Every time you get a task at work, you have a rhetorical situation. Your supervisor asking you for 3 lines of ad copy for a particular event is a rhetorical situation. Updating a 1,000-page manual in FrameMaker that's been added to and revised for 7 years is a rhetorical situation. Changing the text on a web button is a rhetorical situation. They are all responses to a need, a problem, and they all involve language and design elements in solving that problem. Okay, our textbook concentrates primarily on ethos and pathos for document design, so let's work through some examples. On this page, I have an ad from one of the companies I used to work for, Audio-Technica US. In it, we see one main landscape-oriented photo of a singer with a wireless handheld mic. We also see 4 smaller portrait-oriented photos of singers. On the bottom, we see the company logo quite prominently, as well as a photo of the wireless system, probably the 5000 series, if I'm not mistaken, 4 handhelds, and the 50th anniversary logo. Now let me take you through what I see here, so you have an inkling of what to look for in the next few ads. First, I note the very high quality of the photos. These were obviously taken by a professional with big glass, not some schmo in the mosh pit with an iPhone. Also, I noticed that in the main photo, the largest one, the AT logo is recognizable on the bottom of the handheld. The presumption is that all these young artists are easily recognizable. Now, if I still worked there, I'd probably know all of them. So the first bit of ethos is this. Hey, look at all these popular young artists who use our wireless system. Another item that conveys ethos is that 50th anniversary logo, which basically tells us, hey, this company's been around for 50 years. They must be doing something right. We also note that these are vocal mics, and if you look closely, you can tell that 2 are condensers and 2 are dynamics. The red band on the dynamics and the blue is on the condensers. The little pyramid-looking A symbol has, I believe, been the company logo since the beginning, when the company was in Japan and was known for making turntables and replacement styli. The simplicity of the ad speaks to the notion that the audience already knows this company, so AT doesn't need a lot of flash to gain attention. The bottom is a simple white bar, not some colorful banner-type graphic. Ethos is assumed here. Also, I know from my other courses that landscape layout ads read from left to right in Western culture, which is interesting considering that this one might work better read top to bottom. On top you get the artists, and on the bottom is the zinger. All these artists use our wireless mic systems. Left to right composition usually implies given to new information, whereas top to bottom usually implies here's what you want, and then here's how to get it. Now this all comes from the Kress and Van Leeuwen book, Reading Images, The Grammar of Visual Design, a book I highly recommend if you're interested in visual argument. I could go on a bit, but let's work through a few more for evidence of ethos. Here is an Urban Outfitters ad. What can we learn about this company's ethos from this ad? You may want to just pause here and scratch down some notes about the ad. And hint, hint, your responses would make a really good discussion post. Okay, here's a Tough Mudder ad. This is a 2-page layout, possibly for a brochure, about the Tough Mudder competitions. What can we infer about this company's ethos from the layout, the color scheme, the elements, and so forth? Pause here, write some things down, make possibly a great post about them. Now, just about everybody recognizes this company. In fact, I used to temp for this company when I lived in Columbus, Ohio. I believe this is a screen cap from their website's landing page, although it's probably not absolutely current. What can we infer about Victoria's Secret's ethos from the various elements in this web page? Pause, think it over, write down some notes. Okay, we did some work with ethos. Let's take a look at emotional appeals, which are so integral to visual design. Once again, we have an ad layout that is landscape-oriented, and we naturally want to read it left to right. But where does your eye go first? Does it go to the text? Does it go to the blue prosthetic leg and foot? What can we tell about the person from his or her natural leg? What do we presume about the prosthetic leg from the ad copy? And why is the company, BMW, interested in running an ad like this? How can talking about drunk driving benefit a car company's sales? Or does it? In other words, is this ad as much about ethos as it is about pathos? All right, tell me what you see in this ad picturing Tony Blair, who's the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, with a UPC code on his upper lip. And just in case you can't see the small print, it says ID cards have worked well in Europe before. And the website that it comes from is www.no2id.net. How does this ad get to your emotions? Is it the text? Is it the boxer's facial expression? The color scheme? The language? Or what? You may have noticed the text says, I choose to fight, dogs don't. Dog fighting is for cowards, don't do it. And the boxer is Sugar Shane Mosley. This ad. Whenever I share this ad with workplace writing students, the giggles go on for a good minute or so. It'll blow your mind away. Burger King, BK Super 7-incher. I don't think I need to say too much about it. It's kind of self-explanatory. So what elements of this ad work on the emotions? Okay. Now that we've gone over some examples and I've asked you to think up some ideas of your own and contribute those to some posts, for next week's class, I'd like you to do this assignment. Choose a document from the assortment posted on D2L and perform an analysis using the information in Chapter 2. So the homework is not based on the chapter we just did, it's preparing for the next reading. This will be discussed in class and turned in. You can write this up any way you wish. As a Word or other text document, or maybe you could place the document in Word as an image and use the comment feature to add notes. You could even open it in some kind of imaging software and pop comments or discussion in as you see fit. As long as the file type is recognized by D2L, it's okay by me. So, you'll go to D2L, the name of the course, which is course document design, the professional document, content, homework assignments. You'll choose week 2, select and download a document, just one, and then analyze the design objects, the shape, the orientation, the texture, the color, the value, the size, and the position. And then analyze the 6 principles of design and how they're used in this document: similarity, contrast, proximity, alignment, order, and enclosure. And I'll leave a board open on the discussion boards if anyone has any questions about the homework, but it should be fairly self-explanatory once you've taken a good close look at Chapter 2. Thanks everyone, and I'm looking forward to seeing your posts on the discussion boards. Have a great weekend.